The clock on the digital register read 2:03 in the morning. Outside, Harbor City was trying to wash itself clean. The rain wasn't just falling, it was coming down in sheets, hitting the massive floor-to-ceiling glass of the Cafe Astra with a sound like static. I'm Maya Delgado. I'm 27, and for the last 10 months, I've been the one who wipes down the chrome espresso machine when the museum is breathing deepest. We weren't just a cafe, we were an experiential dining node inside the Harbor City Museum of Contemporary Art. That's what the manual said. To me, it was just a counter, 3 blenders, and a high-margin pastry case. I was at the end of my shift, the dead air moment before the morning prep crew arrived. My feet ached, a low throb that had worked its way up into my calves. I was tired, but it was the kind of tired that's too wired to sleep. That's when I saw her again. She was huddled under the massive marble archway that marked the museum's main entrance. Ivy Whitaker. I didn't know her name then. Of course. She was just a shape this city preferred to ignore. A woman in a gray, threadbare beanie, knees drawn to her chest, trying to make herself small against the stone. The wind whipped the rain into the alcove, and I could see the tremors running through her, clear as day, even from 50 feet away through the spotless glass. My eyes cut to the surplus rack. 1 pre-wrapped chicken salad sandwich on focaccia. It was dated for today, which meant in exactly 57 minutes. I was required by policy to scan it out and toss it into the locked organics bin. Next to it, the thermal carafe of house cocoa, still maybe a quarter full, still warm. I looked up. Right on cue, the little black dome of the fisheye security camera stared back at me, the unblinking eye. And right next to the register, the gleaming, laser-etched acrylic sign Urban Culture Hospitality is proud to partner with the HCAM to ensure a pristine and secure experience for all patrons. We reserve the right to refuse service. Solicitation or sheltering on museum property is strictly prohibited. It was the polite, corporate way of saying, don't feed the strays. I looked at Ivy. I looked at the sandwich. I thought about my rent, due in 3 days. I thought about the past due notice on my counter at home. The sandwich was garbage. The cocoa was garbage. The rule was garbage. I didn't use the front doors. They had sensors that chimed. Instead, I grabbed the sandwich and poured the cocoa into one of the big 16-ounce paper cups. I went back past the sinks, past the humming ice machine, and pushed the steel bar on the staff fire escape. The alarm didn't sound. We disarmed it for trash runs, but the hiss of the hydraulic door closing was loud in the sudden, wet roar of the storm. The cold hit me instantly, plastering my thin polyester uniform shirt to my skin. "Hey," I called out. My voice was thin in the wind. She flinched, her head snapping up. Her eyes were wide, terrified, expecting a guard, expecting to be told to move. "It's okay," I said, jogging the 10 feet of exposed terrace. The rain was ice cold. "I'm not security. I brought you something." I held out the food. The steam from the cocoa cup rose in a thick white plume, catching the cold, blue uplighting that illuminated the museum's marble facade. She stared at the cup, then at my face, then back at the cup. Her hands were raw, chapped red and purple. "Take it," I urged. She reached out. Her fingers were trembling so badly she fumbled the cup. I steadied her hand with mine. Her skin felt like frozen paper. "It's hot cocoa," I said, pushing the sandwich into her other hand. "And a sandwich. It's just from the cafe." She didn't drink. She just closed her eyes and held the cup under her nose, inhaling the steam as if it were oxygen. "Oh," she whispered. The word was a dry rasp. "God bless you, child. God bless you." "Just get it down before it gets cold," I said. I was already backing away, trying to get back inside before... "Delgado, what in the hell do you think you're doing?" The voice was a nasal bark, cutting through the storm. It was amplified, not by a megaphone, but by pure, unadulterated managerial rage. "Neil Parkhurst." He burst through the main glass doors, his cheap suit jacket flapping open over his wrinkled button-down. He was holding his walkie-talkie, the antenna whipping back and forth. The red light on his shoulder mic was blinking. He'd been watching the monitors. "Neil, You know the protocol. Delgado, you are actively breaching operational standards." He was marching toward us, his dress shoes slipping on the wet marble. The static burst from his walkie-talkie was deafening. "You are compromising the brand." Ivy recoiled, pulling herself tighter against the pillar, trying to disappear. She looked like she was about to bolt, leaving the food behind. "It was waste!" "Neil," I yelled back over the wind. "It was going in the trash. In less than an hour, I was throwing it out." "You did not throw it out. You served it," he spat. He was in my face now, shorter than me but vibrating with indignation. He smelled like stale coffee and department store cologne. "You served restricted product to non-patron vagrants on museum property." He snatched the walkie-talkie from his belt. "Security, I need containment on the East Terrace. We have a Code 4 breach, and get brand integrity on the line. I want this documented." My stomach turned to ice. "Brand integrity, Neil. It's 2 a.m. It's a sandwich." "It's a violation of the urban culture moral charter." He jabbed a finger at Ivy. "And you," he snarled at her. "You are trespassing. You know the rules." A second later, a much larger man in a black Clearline Security rain slicker came through the fire door I'd left open. He was the kind of guy who looked like he'd been born wearing a utility belt. "Ma'am, you need to leave the premises. Now," the guard said. His voice wasn't angry, just flat, bored. Ivy was trying to stand, fumbling with the sandwich. "I'm sorry, sir, I'm going." "Drop the product," Neil ordered. Ivy froze. "She's not," I started. "Drop it," Neil barked. The guard stepped forward and simply took the food from her hands. He didn't rip it away, he just took it, with an authority she had no strength to fight. He tossed the sandwich and the full cup of cocoa into the overflowing trash receptacle by the steps. It landed with a wet thud. Ivy just watched it go. A small, broken sound escaped her throat. "Get her off the steps," Neil ordered the guard. "If she's not gone in 30 seconds, call the city cleanliness task force. I want her processed." The guard put a heavy hand on Ivy's shoulder. "Let's go, ma'am. Don't make this difficult." He was steering her, hard, toward the steps that led down to the sidewalk, down into the worst of the rain. Ivy was shivering violently now, her thin sweater soaked through. I don't know what snapped. It wasn't thought. It was just fire. "Stop," I said. I shrugged out of my own jacket. It was just a thin, black zip-up, the one I'd bought at a thrift store for $5, but it was dry. Before Neil could say a word, I stepped past him and pushed the guard's hand off Ivy's shoulder. He tensed, his hand dropping to his belt. I didn't care. I wrapped my jacket around Ivy's shaking shoulders. She looked up at me, her eyes clouded with a confusion so deep it hurt to look at. Click flash. We all froze. Across the plaza, near the curb, a tourist, a kid, maybe with a high-end camera, had just taken a picture. The flash illuminated the three of us, the guard, hand on his hip, me, hands on the homeless woman's shoulders, and Neil, mouth open in a perfect O of fury. The kid lowered his camera and hurried off into the rain. Neil's face went from red to a pale, blotchy white. The public, we'd been seen. His voice dropped to a low, venomous hiss. "Delgado, you're done." He reached out and, with 2 fingers, ripped my laminated name badge off my shirt. The magnetic clasp snapped loudly. "You are terminated," he said, the words precise, "effective immediately, for gross misconduct and violation of brand ethics." "Neil, you can't be—" "I can, and I am." He was already walking back toward the cafe doors. "Out of the rain. I want you to sign the termination paperwork, now." "What about my pay?" I asked, following him, the rain already soaking my shirt. My last jacket was walking away on Ivy's back. Per the reputation clause in your hiring agreement, any termination based on brand damage results in a full freeze of all pending wages for a minimum of 14 business days, pending a full review by the Bureau. 14 days, a 14-day freeze. My rent was due. My electric was past due. He wasn't just firing me. He was gutting me. Neil, sign the tablet, Maya, or I'll have Clearline escort you out for trespassing. I stood there, dripping on the pristine tile of the atrium. The guard was back at his post, watching me. Neil held out the glowing tablet, the brand ethics violation report already pulled up. I signed it. My hand was shaking. 10 minutes later, I was walking out the staff exit, the same fire door I'd used to give Ivy the cocoa. I was holding a soggy cardboard box with my coffee mug, a spare pair of shoes, and a bottle of ibuprofen. The wind howled down the alleyway, a high-pitched scream. The storm was getting worse. Ivy was at the bottom of the concrete steps, waiting by the street. She hadn't left. She was still wearing my jacket. When she saw me, her face crumpled. "Oh, child," she choked out, stepping toward me. "They didn't. Not because of me. I told you he was. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for making trouble for you." "It wasn't your fault," I said. The words felt like gravel in my mouth. I pulled the box closer to my chest. "It wasn't you." I just stood there, paralyzed. 27 years old, a half-finished community college degree, no job, and maybe $40 in my checking account. I was standing in the rain, locked out. I was one bad night away from being Ivy. I looked up, past her, toward the main street. The tourist was long gone. The street was empty, except for the river of gutter water. No, not empty. Parked across the street, just outside the main pool of the streetlights, was a sedan, a long, black, expensive-looking one, the kind that looks like it's armored, all quiet menace and tinted glass. It was idling, the engine a low hum I could barely hear over the rain. As I watched, the back window lowered, not all the way, just enough. I couldn't see the man inside clearly, just the sharp silhouette of a jaw and a collar, but I could see his eyes, even in the dark, even from that distance. I could see them. They were fixed on the scene, on me, on Ivy. They were gray, not dark gray, ice, cold, clear, and absolutely still, when he was just watching. Ivy touched my arm. "You'll get cold, child. You should go home." I looked away from the car, back to her. "So should you," I whispered. I turned and started walking toward the bus stop, 3 blocks away. I didn't look back at the cafe, and I didn't look back at the car. I just felt those eyes on my back, like a sudden drop in temperature, all the way until I turned the corner. I had taken maybe 2 steps toward the corner, the soggy cardboard box digging into my chest, the rain plastering my thin shirt to my skin. I could feel those eyes from the black sedan, a physical weight on my shoulder blades. Then I heard a sound that didn't belong in the storm. A click, soft, heavy, and expensive, the sound of a luxury car door opening. I stopped. I couldn't help it. I turned back. Ivy was still standing on the sidewalk, my jacket a dark patch on her small frame. She was watching the car, too. The man who stepped out, he didn't belong here. He wasn't a tourist. He wasn't museum staff. He was wearing a dark suit that probably cost more than my last 6 months' rent. It was tailored so perfectly it looked less like clothing and more like a warning. He was tall, maybe 35. He didn't have an umbrella, but he didn't seem to notice the rain, or perhaps the rain wouldn't dare. He moved with a stillness that was terrifying. All the noise of the city, the wind, the sirens, the rain itself seemed to quiet down around him. The Clearline guard, the one who had tossed the cocoa, was still standing under the museum archway, trying to look important. The man in the suit didn't look at me, and he didn't look at Ivy. He walked straight past us, his expensive leather shoes silent on the wet pavement, and stopped directly in front of the guard. He was several inches taller than the guard. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "I'm here to pick up my mother," he said. The voice was low, smooth, but with a gravelly texture beneath it, like silk laid over rock. The guard visibly stiffened. He looked from the man to the car and then squinted at Ivy, who was trembling 10 feet away. The guard's brain tried to connect the two. It failed. "Sir," the guard started, puffing up his chest, "that individual is not permitted." The man didn't move. He just watched the guard. He didn't threaten him. He didn't bribe him. He just looked at him. Those ice-gray eyes. The silence stretched for 3 seconds. 4. The guard's bluster just evaporated. It dissolved in the rain. My apologies, sir. I didn't..." The man just turned his back on him, mid-sentence. He walked over to us. He stopped in front of Ivy, the hard lines of his face, and they were hard. All angles and shadows seemed to break apart for just a second. It wasn't a smile. It was something more complicated. He reached out and gently, so gently it made my throat tighten. He touched her shoulder. "Mom," he said. My brain stalled. The box in my arms suddenly felt 1,000 pounds heavier. Mom, this was not a word I expected to hear. Not here. Not from him. Directed at her. Ivy looked up at him, and her fear was gone, replaced by a bone-deep weariness and something else. A flicker of warmth. "Nico," she rasped. She reached up with one of her raw, trembling hands and touched his face, his perfectly shaven, expensive face. "Nico, you're thinner." He actually closed his eyes at her touch. A flicker of pain, or memory, or both, passed over his features. It was there and gone in a heartbeat. When he opened them, the ice was back. But it was different. It was the ice that forms over a deep, moving river. "I know, Mom," he said. "Let's get you warm." What is happening?" Neil Parkhurst. He comes scuttling back out of the cafe, drawn by the black sedan and the sight of a man in a suit talking to his security. He was holding my confiscated ID badge in his hand, clutching it like a trophy. He saw the man. He saw the car. He saw the way the man was touching Ivy. Neil's face, which had been twisted in a mask of managerial fury, was now desperately trying to rearrange itself into a smile. It was a horrible sight. "Sir," Neil said, practically bowing, "I apologize for any confusion here. This woman was soliciting on the property. We had a breach." The man, Nico, didn't even look at him. It was the most complete dismissal I had ever seen. It was as if Neil wasn't there, as if he wasn't even worth the oxygen to ignore. He kept his focus entirely on Ivy, but I felt his attention shift. Then, slowly, he turned his head. He didn't look at Neil. He looked at me. Those gray eyes locked onto mine. He saw the box in my arms. He saw my soaked uniform. He saw the name badge in Neil's trembling hand. He took in the entire scene in one silent sweep. "You," he said to me. His voice was quiet, but it cut through everything. "You gave her the coat." It wasn't a question. I swallowed. My own voice sounded small, rusty. It's just an old jacket." "And the food," he stated. It was going to be thrown out." He held my gaze. I felt like I was being X-rayed, like he could see every bad decision I'd ever made, every late bill, every time I'd backed down. And for some reason, I wasn't scared. I was just still. "You did something this city forgot how to do," he said. "Thank you." Neil made a choking sound. "Sir, I must insist this employee, Maya, she was terminated for violating—" "I heard you," Nico said, finally glancing at Neil. The drop in temperature was immediate. "She was terminated." He looked back at me. I just nodded, unable to speak. A strange memory flickered in my head, hot and sharp. I was 17. My stepfather had just put his fist through the drywall, about 6 inches from my head, and my math teacher, Mr. Henderson, a quiet man I'd always thought was terrified of his own shadow, had shown up at our door. He'd seen the bruises on my mom. He'd seen my face. He didn't yell. He just stood in the doorway and said, "I'm here to pick up Maya for the calculus tutoring." He hadn't moved until my stepfather let me go. This man, Nico, had the same energy, but 1,000 times more dangerous. Ivy, who seemed to be drawing strength from his presence, shuffled forward. She laid her cold hand on my arm. "You did good, child," she whispered, and her hand was steady now. "You did real good." It felt strange, like she was passing me something. Courage, maybe. Nico was shrugging out of his own trench coat. It was beautiful. Dark wool, probably cashmere. He draped it over Ivy's shoulders, right over my own cheap jacket. He was covering her in layers of warmth, of protection. A second car, a black SUV, had pulled up behind the sedan. It idled silently. He nodded to it, and a door opened. He put his arm around Ivy, guiding her. "Ansel will get you settled," he said to her. She started to go, then stopped and looked back at me, her eyes sharp under the beanie. "Will I see you again?" she asked. The man, Nico, looked at me too. He gave a single, curt nod. My heart did a stupid, painful lurch. His eyes then darted, just for a second, to Neil's hand, to the ID badge. He stared at it. I saw his gaze focus, his pupils tighten. He was reading my name, Maya Delgado. He wasn't just reading it, he was memorizing it. He was filing it away. He didn't say another word to me. He got Ivy into the SUV, then walked to his own sedan. The doors clicked shut, one after the other. The two vehicles pulled away from the curb, their engines nothing but a low vibration, and disappeared into the rain. They were gone. The entire encounter had lasted maybe 90 seconds. The air rushed back in, the wind screamed, the rain felt colder. I was alone on the sidewalk with Neil Parkhurst. Neil was shaking. He was pale, sweating despite the cold. He looked at the spot where the cars had been. Then he looked at me. His terror, having no other place to go, curdled back into pure sulfuric rage. "You," he hissed, jabbing the ID badge at me. "You think you're smart? You think that scum having a rich son changes anything?" He was breathing hard. His little moment of corporate power shattered. "You're done, Delgado. You hear me?" He stepped closer, invading my space. "You're not just fired from Astra, you're blacklisted. The entire urban culture hospitality group. Every cafe, every museum kitchen, every hotel contract in this city. You'll be lucky to get a job scrubbing toilets at a bus station by the time I'm through. I will personally see to it." I looked at him, at his blotchy face, his stupid clip-on tie, his pathetic anger. For the first time all night, I wasn't cold. I wasn't scared. I just turned my back on him. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't say anything. I left him there, sputtering under the archway. I walked away from the museum, clutching my box. The rain was heavy, but it wasn't just rain anymore. I didn't know who Domenico Armand was. I didn't know why he'd called a homeless woman Mom. I didn't know what that single, sharp nod had meant. But as I turned the corner, I knew one thing. My life had just slipped, like a tire on ice. It had slid off one track and slammed hard onto another, and I had no idea where it was going. The rain stopped around 4 a.m. The silence that followed was almost worse. I made it back to my studio apartment in Lakeview Courts, which was a fancy name for a 4-story brick box smelling of boiled cabbage and damp carpet, just as the sky was turning a bruised purple. I didn't sleep. I just stood under a scalding hot shower for 20 minutes, trying to wash the night off me, trying to wash off the feeling of Neil's voice, and the sight of Ivy watching that sandwich fall into the trash, and the memory of those ice-gray eyes from the sedan. By 6 a.m., I was on my laptop. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by the cold, metallic taste of panic. My bank account balance was $43.16. The 14-day freeze Neil mentioned wasn't a joke. My pending paycheck for the last 2 weeks was just gone, vanished from the employee portal. My rent was $700, due in 3 days. I was a statistic, one missed check from disaster. My first move was to fight back, the official way. I found the website for the Metropolitan Worker Fairness Board. It was a terrible, badly designed city website, full of broken links, but I found the online complaint form. I filled it out, every box, Employer Urban Culture Hospitality subsidiary of Astra Group Dining. Manager Neil Parkhurst. Nature of complaint, wrongful termination. I described the incident in detail. The surplus food, the waste policy, the fact that Ivy was seeking shelter from a dangerous storm. I described Neil's reputation clause and the 14-day wage freeze. I hit submit. My inbox pinged less than a minute later, an automated reply. Thank you for contacting the Metropolitan Worker Fairness Board. Your complaint case, 771B, has been received. A case officer will be assigned to review your claim within 90 business days. 90 days. 3 months? I stared at the screen. 90 days might as well have been 90 years. The Fairness Board was a joke, a digital trash can for people like me. Okay, plan B, a new job, immediately. I polished my resume. Maya Delgado, shift supervisor, 10 months experience, proficient in POS systems, inventory management, and customer relations. I'd always been a good worker, reliable. I never called in sick. I started blasting it out. Every cafe, every hotel, every restaurant in Harbor City with a now hiring post on a job site. The first rejection came at 9:05 a.m. Thank you for your interest, but the position has been filled. The second came at 9:30. Thank you, but we've decided to move forward with candidates whose experience more closely matches our needs. By noon, I had sent 22 applications. I had received 17 rejections. All of them were variations of the same polite, meaningless no. Neil hadn't been bluffing. He hadn't just fired me. He had poisoned the well. The blacklist was real. It was an invisible, high-speed network of managers and HR departments, and my name was now on it, flagged in red. I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. This was bigger than Neil. This was the entire urban culture hospitality machine. I wasn't just unemployed, I was unemployable. I was making a list of temp agencies when my phone buzzed. It wasn't an email. It was a text from my friend Sarah. Maya, this is crazy. Is this you? There was a link. My finger trembled as I clicked it. It took me to a local Harbor City news blog, the kind that mostly posts about street festivals and new restaurants. But this was the top story. The headline read, "Local cafe worker fired for feeding homeless woman in storm." And there it was, the video. It wasn't just a photo. The tourist had taken a video. It was grainy, shot from across the plaza, partially obscured by rain, but it was all there. The flash I remembered was just the beginning. I watched myself, a small, soaked figure pushing past Neil. I watched myself wrap my jacket around Ivy's shoulders. I watched the clear line guard put his hand on her. I watched Neil, his face twisted, yelling at me. I watched him rip the badge off my shirt. The camera zoomed in just as I was taking the box of my belongings, and Ivy was walking up to me. Her face crumpled in that heartbreaking apology. The audio was mostly wind, but you could hear her voice, thin and desperate. "I'm so sorry, child. I'm so sorry." Then the video ended. I felt sick. My hands were shaking. I was completely exposed. My private, humiliating rock bottom was now public entertainment. The post had over 5,000 shares. The comment section was a war zone. That Neil Parkhurst is a monster. Fire him, urban culture hospitality should be ashamed. He was just enforcing policy. If you feed one, they all come. And then, the hashtag. It was already trending in the Harbor City feed. Let her eat. I closed the laptop, my heart hammering. This was wrong. This wasn't helping. This was just noise. It was making me a target. My inbox pinged again. I expected another job rejection, or maybe hate mail from someone who thought I was a bleeding heart. It was neither. The sender was anonymous, no name, just a string of jumbled letters from a proxy server. The subject line was blank. There was only one line of text. "Don't be a hero. Harbor City doesn't need your cheap kindness. Stay down." This wasn't a job rejection. This wasn't an internet troll. This was a threat. I stood up, backing away from the laptop as if it were a snake. I went to my window. I lived on the 3rd floor, overlooking a concrete courtyard. There was no one there. but I suddenly felt watched. I felt the same way I had last night, when that black sedan was idling in the rain. I pulled the blinds shut. The blacklist was one thing, Neil was a bully, but this was something else. This was dark. This was the city pushing back, telling me to disappear. I sat on my bed, knees to my chest, the way Ivy had sat against the pillar. The panic was back, cold and sharp. I had $43. I had no job. I had no prospects. And now, someone was threatening me for an act of what kindness? My phone buzzed again. This time, I flinched. I looked at the screen. A new text message. It wasn't from Sarah. The number was blocked. Unknown sender. My thumb hovered over the notification. I opened it. If you need help, call D. Just that. 5 words and an initial. D. My heart stopped. It didn't just lurch this time. It stopped cold. Domenico. It had to be. The man with the ice-gray eyes. The man Ivy called Nico. The man who had looked at my name badge like he was engraving it on his memory. I stared at the message. It wasn't a job offer. It wasn't a threat. It was something else. A door. But a door to what? I thought about my self-reliance, the pride I had in paying my own bills, in needing no one. I thought about the lessons my mother taught me before she died. Don't you ever let a man be your lifeline. Maya, you're your own lifeline. But my lifeline was cut. Neil had cut it. The city had cut it. The anonymous emailer was threatening to cut what was left. I looked at the text message. If you need help, call. I looked at my laptop, where the 90-day rejection sat next to the email telling me to stay down. I was trapped between my principles and my survival, and that single, terrifying letter D was sitting right in the middle. I didn't call the number. For 2 days, that text message sat on my phone, a single, terrifying initial D. My mother's voice was too loud in my head. You're your own lifeline. Maya, don't you ever let a man be your lifeline. So, I hit the pavement. The real pavement. I walked until my feet blistered, going to every diner, every hotel, every coffee shop with a help wanted sign taped in the window. I avoided anything that looked corporate, anything that might be connected to the urban culture network. It was useless. The answer was always the same. We just filled the position. We're not hiring, that sign is old. We'll call you. Neil had been thorough. The blacklist was a silent, invisible wall. My $43 had dwindled to $12. The threatening email, "Stay down," kept flashing in my mind. I was scared. I was desperate, but I wasn't broken. On the 4th day, I found it. The Quick Stop Grocers, a 24-hour convenience store on a badly lit corner 8 blocks from my apartment. It smelled like stale beer and motor oil. The owner, a tired, rail-thin man named Mr. Patel, looked me over once, saw the desperation in my eyes, and hired me. Graveyard shift, 10 at night till 6 in the morning, $8 an hour, cash under the table. My new job was selling lottery tickets, sour coffee and cigarettes to insomniacs, cab drivers and drunk college kids. It was humiliating. It was a step down from the museum's marble and chrome, but it was survival. I'd been there 3 nights. It was almost 1 in the morning, the deadest hour. The fluorescent lights hummed, a high-pitched sound that was drilling into my skull. I was wiping down the counter, trying to ignore the smell of the perpetually rolling hot dogs. When the bell over the door jingled, I looked up, my automatic welcome to Quick Stop dying in my throat. It was him, Domenico. He wasn't wearing the $3,000 suit. He was dressed in dark, fitted jeans, scuffed boots, and a simple black Henley that didn't do a good job of hiding the fact that he was built like a stone wall. He looked normal, dangerously normal. My heart did a painful thump against my ribs. I immediately glanced past him, out the glass door. The street was dark. The black sedan wasn't there. No SUV. Had he come alone? I scanned the street again. No, there, across the road, parked in the shadows of a closed laundromat, was a dark car. The lights were off, but I could feel it, idling. He wasn't alone. He was just quiet about it. He didn't look at me. He walked past the counter to the back of the store. He grabbed a bottle of water from the cooler. Then he stopped at the sad, stained coffee station, picked up one of the flimsy styrofoam cups, and filled it from the pot I'd made 2 hours ago. It had to be sludge. He walked to the counter and placed the water and the burnt coffee down. His presence seemed to suck all the air out of the tiny, cramped store. I just stood there, my hands frozen on the rag. "That'll be $2.50. I managed to say. My voice was flat. He pulled a $10 bill from his pocket, not a wallet, just the bill. As I reached for it, his eyes met mine, the same ice gray, clear, deep, and unblinking. "Thank you," he said. The voice was quiet. There was no power in it, no authority. It was just a statement, man to woman, for giving my mother that food. The word mother still sounded strange, alien coming from him. I flinched. This wasn't a social call. He'd found me at my under-the-table job. The text message hadn't been an offer. It had been a prelude. "I don't accept payment," I said. My voice was harder than I intended. Or gifts. I took his 10 and slapped $7.50 in change down on the counter. He looked at the change, then back at me. A very small, almost invisible smile ticked at the corner of his mouth. "It's not a gift, it's coffee." He pushed the change back toward me. "Keep it." "I don't—" "It's cold out," he said, cutting me off. "My car is just outside. Would you take a walk with me?" Panic, bright and cold. "I can't. I'm working." He didn't even take his eyes off me. "Mr. Patel?" he called out, his voice barely rising, but it cut through the hum of the lights. Mr. Patel, who I thought was asleep in the back office on his cot, burst through the curtain, his eyes wide and terrified. He saw Domenico and he actually bowed. Mr. Armand, sir, I am so sorry. I did not know you were here. Is everything all right?" "Everything is fine," Domenico said, his voice smooth as glass. "Maya needs a break. She's taking an hour. That's all right with you, isn't it?" "An hour. Yes, of course, mister." Patel was wringing his hands, looking at me with a new, strange mix of fear and respect. "Maya, you go on, take your break." My stomach twisted. So much for being invisible. So much for my lifeline. He owned this, too. He owned my $8 an hour, under-the-table desperation. I felt trapped. There was no here. Slowly, my hands shaking with a cold rage, I untied the stupid mustard-stained red apron and dropped it on the counter. I grabbed my thin sweater from the hook. "I'll be back in an hour," I said to Mr. Patel, but I was looking at Domenico. The air outside was sharp. The storm had passed a few days ago, but the wind coming off the river was raw, carrying the smell of cold water and exhaust. Domenico sipped his terrible coffee as we walked. He didn't offer me his arm. He didn't try to guide me. He just walked beside me, his hands in his pockets, matching my pace. We walked in silence for 2 blocks toward the water. I kept checking over my shoulder. Nothing. But then I saw them. 2 men, dressed in dark work clothes, walking about half a block behind us. They were just 2 guys, talking, not looking our way, but they mirrored every turn we made. Shadows. He brought shadows. We reached Jericho Pier. At this hour, it was deserted, a long wooden finger pointing into the black, churning water of the harbor. The city skyline was a jagged line of diamonds on the other side. We stopped at the end of the railing, looking out. "She's not my biological mother," he said, breaking the silence. His voice was different out here. The city noise muffled it, made it more human. "I figured as much," I said, my arms crossed tight against my chest. "She was my 10th grade math teacher," he said. He was staring at the water, not at me. "Ivy Whitaker, I was a bad kid, angry. My stepfather, he was a mean drunk. He liked to teach lessons." He paused, and I saw his jaw clench. "One night, he came home, found out I'd skipped school. He decided to correct me. Ivy lived in the apartment below us. She must have heard the noise, the yelling, the other sounds. He took a breath. She came up. She didn't call the cops. She just came up. She stood in the doorway. He was a big guy, twice her size, reeking of whiskey. She just looked at him and said the principal had sent her, that I had to come with her for a mandatory placement review. Total lie. He was drunk enough to believe it. He let me go. He turned the styrofoam cup in his hands. She took me to her apartment. An hour later, he came banging on her door, sober enough to be furious. She hid me, shoved me under her kitchen table, behind a pile of laundry. She stood in front of that table and told him I'd left, that she'd called a cab. He didn't believe her. He put his hands on her, tried to push her aside. Domenico's hand clenched so hard the cheap cup cracked, spilling hot coffee over his fingers. He didn't even flinch. She never moved. She just kept saying, "He's gone." He finally gave up. I stayed under that table for 3 hours, listening to her cry quietly after he left. She saved my life that night, so yeah, she's Mom. The story settled on me, heavy and familiar, a dark, ugly recognition. I found myself speaking before I could stop, my voice a whisper. My mother, she used to do the same. He turned, his full attention on me. The wind pulled a strand of hair across my face. My father left when I was 6, I said, my eyes fixed on the black water. The guy she married after he was like yours. He used a hammer, not on us, on the walls, on the furniture, to show what he could do. I was 8. I broke a glass. He heard it from the other room. I heard him get up. I heard the tone. He started yelling. My mom she grabbed me. She didn't say anything. She just threw me into the linen closet and shut the door. And she stood in front of it. I could still smell the soap, the darkness. I sat in there, covering my ears. I just listened to the sounds, the thuds, her pleading, him yelling. When he finally left, drove off. She opened the door. Her back, he hadn't used the hammer, but he'd used his fists to try and get her to move. I shivered, but not from the cold. She just looked at me, pushed the hair out of my eyes, and said, "It's okay, mija. We're okay." She shielded me. A long silence stretched between us. It wasn't awkward, it was heavy, filled. We weren't strangers anymore. We were 2 kids from the same darkness, hiding behind 2 different women, 2 survivors, staring at each other across a gap of years. "Ivy's stubborn," he said finally, his voice rough. "After the housing crisis, she lost her pension, then her apartment. She won't take my money. She calls it dirty. Says she won't be party to it. She has principles," I said quietly. "She's homeless," he countered, the edge back in his voice. "Principles are a luxury she can't afford. Which brings me to you." I tensed. "I run a foundation," he said. "The Riverfront Restoration Fund. It's legitimate. We fund infrastructure projects, community grants." "I've seen the name on benches," I said. "I want to help you. Maya, what Neil Parkhurst did, that's not how the world should work." He laid it out, flat and clean, like a business proposal. 1, the blacklist, I can make 1 call. It's gone by tomorrow. 2, your apartment, this quick stop. He said the name with distaste. "It's not safe. I have a building downtown, secure, a 1-bedroom. It's yours, rent-free for a year. 3, your education. You dropped out of community college. My fund has a scholarship program. Full tuition, books, whatever you need to finish." My head was spinning. A new life. Everything I was terrified of. Solved. My rent. My future. "This isn't a debt," he said, as if reading my mind. "You don't owe me anything. You did something for Ivy. For me, I'm just balancing the scales." Balancing the scales. It sounded so clean. I looked at him. I saw the boy under the table, but I also saw the man whose name made Mr. Patel bow. The man who had shadows. "I can't," I said. His face didn't change. "Which part?" "The apartment, the money." My voice was shaking, but I held it steady. "I can't be one of your projects. Domenico, I can't be kept." The word hung in the cold air between us. "But the blacklist," I said, hating the weakness in my own voice. "You said you can fix it. I don't want anyone hurt. I don't want you to hurt Neil." He almost smiled. It was a cold, sharp thing. "I have my own laws, Maya, but for this, no. I won't use violence. I'll have my lawyers contact Urban Culture's parent company. I'll point out the illegality of the wage freeze, the reputation clause, and the potential civil liability they're facing from that viral video. They'll see reason." He called it leverage. I called it a threat, but it was a legal one. "Okay," I whispered. "The blacklist. You can fix that. But that's it. I'll get my own job. I'll get my own apartment. I'll earn my own tuition." "You're as stubborn as she is," he said. "It wasn't an insult." "I have to be." I took a chance. "Is this what you do? Balance scales, is that what they call it now?" He turned away, looking back at the water, dodging the question about his real life. "I fix what's broken," he said. The wind kicked up, a sudden, vicious gust that cut right through my thin sweater. I shivered, a full-body tremor I couldn't hide. Before I could react, he was shrugging out of his jacket. It wasn't the cashmere trench from the other night, just a thick, dark wool coat. "No," I said, backing up a step. "I'm not doing this. I'm not taking your coat." "Doing what being cold?" He didn't ask again. He didn't wait for permission. He just stepped into my space and draped it over my shoulders. It was heavy and so warm. Instantly, the cold was gone. It smelled like him, not cologne, but something clean and sharp, like cold air and wool. He was close, too close. His fingers brushed the side of my neck as he settled the collar. It wasn't aggressive. It was careful. I could feel the heat radiating off his chest. I could hear his breathing. I was trapped in this bubble of his warmth, and my body was screaming thank you while my brain was screaming danger. I looked up at him. His eyes were dark in the dim light of the pier. "Don't make kindness a chain, Mia." "Don't," I whispered, my voice fierce. "Turn this into a chain." His eyes softened. The ice melted, just a little. "It's just a coat, Maya." He stepped back, giving me air. He checked his watch. "Your hour is almost up." He turned and started walking back toward the street. I followed, clutching the lapels of his coat. It was so big. The sleeves hung past my hands. We stopped at the edge of the pier, just before the street. "The blacklist will be gone by morning," he said. "You can keep the coat." "Domenico?" He held up a hand, stopping me. "One more thing." He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the dark city, his face hardening, the man from the pier disappearing, the man from the sedan returning. "That email you received, the threat, stay down. I know about it." My blood went cold. "How?" "It doesn't matter. It was from a rival, Silas Vero, someone who saw the video, saw my interest in Ivy, and saw you. They thought you were a weakness, a pawn." He turned, and his eyes were pure, flat ice. "They know now they were wrong, but I want you to know, if they, or Neil Parkhurst, or anyone so much as looks at you the wrong way, if they touch you again, I will consider it a declaration of war." It was the most terrifying, most protective thing anyone had ever said to me. He didn't wait for a reply. He nodded once, then turned and walked away. The two shadows across the street fell in behind him, melting out of the alley. I watched him get into the dark car, and it pulled away, silent as a ghost. I stood there, wrapped in his coat. I walked back to the quick stop, the smell of him all around me. My heart was doing that stupid, painful thing again. That skip, that beat it shouldn't be beating. I hated the feeling. I hated that I was relying on him. I hated that I was standing in a 24-hour convenience store, wrapped in a Mafia boss's coat. But as I walked back inside, under the humming fluorescent lights, a tiny, treacherous part of me didn't hate it at all. And that was the most dangerous part. He was true to his word. I woke up the next morning, stiff, on my lumpy mattress, his coat still draped over the back of my only chair, the smell of it, cold wool and something clean and male, filled my tiny apartment. It felt like an accusation. My lifeline. I forced myself to ignore it. I got dressed, not in the Quick Stop uniform, but in my one good interview outfit. I had to know if his promise was real or just words on a pier. I walked 3 blocks to a high-end coffee bistro, the Copper Mill, a place that was part of a small, upscale local chain, a place that would have definitely been on the urban culture blacklist. They had a hiring sign in the window. I walked in. The manager, a woman with sharp glasses and sharper blonde hair, looked me up and down. "Can I help you?" "I'm here about the barista position," I said, my voice steady. She sighed, ready to dismiss me. "We've had a lot of applicants. Do you have a resume?" I handed it to her. She scanned it. I watched her eyes hit the urban culture hospitality entry. This was the moment. Her eyes would narrow. She would hand it back. She didn't. She tapped her pen on the counter. 10 months as a shift supervisor at the Astra, that's good. You know the La Marzocco machines. Like the back of my hand, I said. She stared at me for a long, hard second. "Can you work weekends full availability?" "Yes," I said, my heart starting to pound. "Okay," she said, clipping my resume to a board. "I'll be honest. My morning lead just quit. I need someone yesterday. The pay is $16 an hour, plus tips. Can you come in for a trial shift tomorrow, 7 a.m.? $16, just like that." I was back. I was viable. I wasn't unemployable. 7 a.m., I confirmed, a smile breaking across my face, the first real smile in days. "I'll be here." I walked out of the Copper Mill feeling like I could breathe. The sun was out. The city didn't feel so dark. Maybe he just balanced the scale, like he said. He'd fixed it. I didn't need the apartment. I didn't need the tuition. I just needed the wall to be gone. And it was... I could do this. I could be my own lifeline again. I spent the rest of the day in a daze of relief. I even splurged $8 on a celebratory burrito. I went home just as the sun was setting, just as the ugly yellow lights of Lakeview Courts were flickering on. I was exhausted. I was going to sleep for 10 hours before my first real shift. My apartment was on the 3rd floor. The elevator had been broken for 5 years. I took the stairs, my keys in my hand, and the hallway always smelled, a mix of old garlic and damp drywall. The fluorescent light at the end of the hall was flickering, casting jerky, strobe-like shadows. I was halfway to my door, 3B, when the light flickered off and stayed off. I froze. The only light was the dim red glow of the exit sign at the far end. I heard a sound, a scuff, like a boot on linoleum. It wasn't in front of me. It was behind me, from the stairwell I'd just left. My blood turned to ice. "Stay down." I fumbled for my key, my hand suddenly wet with sweat. "Maya Delgado." The voice was a low growl. Not Domenico, someone else. I turned. 3 men. They were just shadows, silhouetted against the dim stairwell door. They were big. They weren't drunk. They were quiet. "Silas just wants to talk," the middle one said. He took a step. I backed up, hitting my own apartment door. "I don't know any Silas. I don't want any trouble." "You already are trouble," another one said, fanning out to my left. They were hurting me, cutting off the path to the other stairs. "Look, I quit the job. I'm not involved. I don't know anything." "He doesn't like people touching what's his," the first one said, "and you've been touching what's his. That old lady, him." He meant Domenico. They thought I was his. "You're mistaken," I said, trying to jam the key into the lock. My hand was shaking so badly I couldn't find the hole. "We're just here to deliver a message." The man lunged. It was fast, too fast. I screamed, but a heavy, gloved hand clamped over my mouth before the sound even got out. The smell of cheap leather and cigarettes filled my nose. I dropped my keys. I kicked, slamming my heel into his shin. He grunted, but his grip was like iron. He slammed me back against the door. The back of my head hit the wood, and my vision flared with white spots. Another man grabbed my arms, wrenching them behind my back. I felt a sharp, stinging pain as my wrist scraped hard against the metal door handle. "That's enough," the first one growled. "Just remind her." He wasn't trying to kill me. He wasn't even trying to take me. He was just scaring me. He was breaking me. He was showing me that my new job, my $16 an hour, my lifeline was a joke. They owned the dark. They owned this hallway. Declaration of war, I thought, the words echoing in my panicked mind. Then, click. It was the sound of my apartment door's deadbolt, the door I was pressed against. The door swung inward, throwing me off balance. I fell, tumbling into my own apartment, the hand ripped from my mouth. The three men stumbled, surprised. A man was standing in my doorway. He was tall, thin, and wearing an impeccable suit. He looked like an accountant. He had a small, silver pin on his lapel. It was the man who had driven Ivy away in the SUV, the one Domenico had called Ansel. The three thugs froze. They didn't see a neighbor. They saw a ghost. "Gentlemen," Ansel said. His voice was polite, bored even. "You seem to be on the wrong floor." The man who had grabbed me snarled, "Who the hell are you?" "Night-kind services," Ansel said calmly. Two more men, built like refrigerators, stepped out of my apartment behind him, flanking him. They wore black polos with the same Night-kind services logo embroidered on the chest. They looked like a high-end cleaning crew. The three Kestrel men looked at Ansel. They looked at the two behind him. They knew this uniform. This was not a fair fight. This was a different syndicate. The lead thug who had grabbed me slowly, very slowly, raised his hands. "No problem," he said, his voice suddenly oily. "Just a misunderstanding." "I'm sure it was," Ansel said. He took one step into the hallway. "Silas Vero is trespassing on Larkfield territory. You will inform him of this. Once." The three men didn't need to be told twice. They didn't run. They just evaporated. They backed away, turned, and disappeared down the stairwell, their boots pounding on the concrete. Silence. The flickering hallway lights snapped back on, humming loudly. I was on my hands and knees in my own doorway, shaking so hard my teeth were chattering. I was breathing in huge, ragged gasps. "Are you all right, Miss Delgado?" Ansel asked. He was standing over me. He hadn't offered me a hand. He was just observing. How did you—" I looked at my door. The lock wasn't broken. He'd had a key. He'd been in my apartment. "We've been close by since you left the pier last night." My shadows. They weren't Domenico's. They were his. "Get up." That voice wasn't Ansel. Domenico? He came up the stairs, taking them two at a time. He wasn't wearing a coat this time, just a dark sweater. He'd come from the car, the one that must have been parked outside. He'd come the second he heard the call. He was half a minute too late. He didn't look at Ansel, and he looked at me, still on the floor, trying to get up. His eyes, those ice-gray eyes, scanned me from head to toe. They were sharp, assessing. They weren't angry. They were cold, colder than the pier. Then his gaze locked onto my left wrist. I looked down, in the struggle, when I'd been slammed against the door. I'd scraped my wrist on the handle. It wasn't deep, but it was raw, a long, red abrasion, already beating with a tiny bit of blood. Domenico's face, which had been a mask of cold control, tightened, his jaw clenched, the muscles in his neck went rigid. He looked from my wrist to my face and then to the empty hallway where the men had been. It was the quietest, most terrifying rage I'd ever seen. He didn't yell, he didn't swear, he just spoke, and his voice was flat steel. "We're moving tonight." "What?" I said, finally pushing myself to my feet. "No, I got a job. Domenico, I start tomorrow. You think they care about your job?" he snapped, the ice cracking. "They touched you. They put their hands on you. This isn't a game. That was Silas. That was his declaration. Now I'm making mine." He looked at Ansel. "Is it ready?" "It's been ready," Ansel replied. I can't just leave," I stammered, looking at my tiny, awful apartment. It was mine. All my stuff. "Ansel's men will pack it. It will be wherever you want it to be tomorrow, but you are not spending one more second in this building." He was deciding. This wasn't a request. It wasn't the man on the pier asking me to take a walk. This was the man from the sedan. This was the boss. I looked at my keys, still on the floor. I looked at my broken, violated doorway. The fight just went out of me. The $16 an hour hope felt childish. He was right. I was a pawn. I just nodded. I didn't even grab my purse. Domenico put his hand on the small of my back, not a caress, but a firm, steering pressure, and guided me out. We went down the stairs, flanked by Ansel and the other two men. A convoy was waiting. Not one car, 3 black SUVs, all idling, all with tinted windows. He opened the door to the middle one. "Get in!" I got in. The interior was black leather and smelled like nothing, just clean. He slid in beside me. The doors locked with a heavy thunk. We drove. We didn't talk. I just watched Lakeview Courts, my whole life, disappear in the rearview mirror. I was shaking again. We drove for 20 minutes across the river, away from the city center, and up into the old money hills. We passed through a high, unmarked iron gate that opened for us without stopping. We pulled up to a house, except it wasn't a house. It was made almost entirely of glass and dark steel, built into the side of a hill, overlooking the entire city. It was hidden by a dense grove of pine trees. It was beautiful, and it looked like a fortress. The nocturne glass house, and Domenico said, his voice still tight. He led me inside. The air was warm, not hot, but a perfect spring-like warmth, and it smelled incredible, like fresh basil and rosemary. The entire entry hall was an indoor greenhouse, herbs growing under soft, yellow lights. "Nico, is that you? Did you bring her?" The voice was familiar. Ivy. She came out of a hallway, not in her gray beanie, but in a warm-looking blue robe. She was wearing a new, soft-looking wool scarf. Her hair was clean. She looked safe. She saw me, and her face lit up. Then she saw my face. She saw the tremor in my hands. She rushed forward and pulled me into a hug. She was small, but her hug was strong. "Oh, child," she whispered, holding me tight. "You're safe now. You're finally safe." She pulled back and looked me in the eyes. "Now, you listen to me. Please don't be stubborn with your own safety. Not anymore. Not with these people." These people had just saved my life. I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I was in a guest room that was bigger than my entire apartment, with sheets that felt like water. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw the hallway. I felt the hand on my mouth. I gave up. I went looking for a kitchen, for a glass of water. I found Domenico. He was in a huge, dark kitchen, lit only by the soft glow from under the cabinets. He wasn't on the phone. He wasn't working. He was standing at the counter, whisking something in a small saucepan on the stove. He heard me and looked up. His face was still drawn, the anger still simmering in his eyes. "Can't sleep," I whispered. "Neither can I," he said. He turned back to the stove. The smell of chocolate, real chocolate, filled the air. Ivy, she has a special recipe, a little cinnamon, a little chili. She says it's the real thing." He poured the thick, dark liquid into 2 heavy ceramic mugs. He pushed one across the marble island toward me. "Mom's recipe," he said. I sat on one of the stools. He sat opposite me. We drank. It was the best hot chocolate I'd ever had. It burned a little on the way down, the chili chasing the sweet. We sat in silence. The house was completely, utterly quiet. "Thank you," I said finally. My voice was small. "For Ansel. For tonight." He nodded. "They won't get that close again." My hand was resting on the counter, and he was resting near his mug. As I reached for a napkin, my shoulder brushed his. Just a tiny, accidental contact. A jolt like static electricity went right through me. I pulled back. He just looked at me. His eyes were no longer cold. They were something else. Deep. Tired. His phone, sitting on the counter, vibrated. A text. He glanced at the screen. It was a single line of text. I saw the name Silas before he flipped it over, dismissing it. He was choosing to sit here, with me, drinking cocoa, while his world was probably catching fire. Our eyes held for a beat, 2 beats. It wasn't sexual. It was heavier. It was 2 people acknowledging the weight of the night, a little bit of warmth, of life, pressed against the skin. Bzzz. It wasn't his phone. It was a low, electronic sound from outside. Domenico was on his feet in an instant, his entire posture changing from the man in the kitchen back to the boss. "What's that?" I asked, moving to the huge glass window that overlooked the city. "Get away from the window, Maya." His voice was sharp. I saw it, a small, dark shape with a single red light, hovering about 100 feet from the house, a drone. "They followed us," I whispered, my stomach dropping. "No," Domenico said. He was standing by a small, black panel on the wall. "They're testing." He flipped a switch. Outside, there was no noise, no explosion, but a faint, blue shimmer seemed to ripple through the air around the glass house. The drone, the Kestrel drone, just stopped. Its red light went out. It didn't crash. It just tumbled, end over end, falling silently into the dark pine trees below. The vortex shield, as the outline called it. I stared at the spot where it had been. "What was that?" "A shield," Domenico said. He was watching the trees, his face grim. "They can't see in. They can't listen, and their toys don't fly." He turned back to me. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. Silas just changed the rules of the game. He picked up his phone. And now, so do I. The silence of the nocturne glass house was louder than the noise of my old apartment. I was safe, but I was in a cage, a beautiful, basil-scented cage where the city skyline glittered below like a carpet of diamonds, completely out of reach. For 2 days, I saw no one but Ivy and, occasionally, the silent, polite Ansel. Domenico was gone. He was, I assumed, waging the war he'd spoken of. I felt like a pawn, taken off the board and put in a box for safekeeping. Then, on the 3rd night, the war came to me. I was watching the 10 o'clock news with Ivy, mostly for the noise, and then my face filled the screen. "The story that has all of Harbor City talking," the anchorwoman said, her voice dripping with manufactured sincerity. "The firing of kindness." It was the video, the grainy tourist footage, but this wasn't some backwater blog. This was HarborCast, the biggest news station in the city. They'd cleaned up the audio. You could hear Neil's voice, sharp and nasal, violating operational standards. You could hear my stupid, thin jacket whipping in the wind. You could hear Ivy, clear as a bell. "I'm so sorry, child." The public, it turned out, was furious. The segment cut to a man-on-the-street interview. "It's disgusting," one woman said. "I'm canceling my museum membership." "That Neil Parkhurst should be fired," a man said, shaking his head. Urban Culture Hospitality had been forced to issue a statement. It was a watery mix of corporate speak about reviewing protocols and valuing all members of our community. It was a lie, and the city knew it. The Let Her Eat hashtag was the #1 trend in the state. "Well," Ivy said, setting down her teacup, "you've certainly stirred the hornet's nest, child." "I didn't do anything," I whispered, hugging my knees. "I just existed." But the news wasn't done. And in a related development, the anchor continued, City Hall was blindsided today by a proposal from Larkfield Public Works. I sat up. Larkfield, Domenico's legitimate company. Citing the overwhelming public outcry over the city's food insecurity crisis, Larkfield has proposed the Harbor City Community Kitchen Fund, a fully funded, nonprofit initiative to be controlled not by the city, but by a board of community leaders, with the goal of providing dignified hot meals, no questions asked. My jaw dropped. He wasn't fighting Silas with his shadows. He was fighting him in broad daylight, in the middle of City Hall. He was using the anger I had accidentally created. He was taking the narrative and weaponizing it. The next morning, Ansel found me in the greenhouse. "Mr. Armand agrees that the current narrative is incomplete, he said, in his precise, emotionless way. He believes your voice should be heard, if you wish it. He'd arranged an interview, not on TV, on Rivermouth Radio, the most popular, most respected independent podcast in the city, the one that politicians were terrified of. They want to talk to me, I asked, my voice small. They want to talk to the angel of the Astra, he said, without a trace of irony. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. A car will be ready. I was terrified. I was a barista, not a public figure, but I was also angry. I was tired of being a symbol, tired of being the girl who got fired or the girl who was attacked. Okay, I said, my voice hardening. I'll do it. The studio was small and dark. The host, a woman named Janie, had a kind voice but eyes that didn't miss a thing. Maya, thank you for coming, she said, adjusting her microphone. You're at the center of a storm. People are calling you a hero. Others are suggesting you're part of something more complicated. Are you afraid? I took a breath. The on-air light was red. I was afraid 2 nights ago, I said, my voice shaking just a little, when 3 men cornered me in my apartment hallway, but I'm not afraid to be here. So the rumors of the attack are true. Yes, but that's not why I'm here. I'm not here to talk about violence. I'm here to talk about hunger. I'm here because I was fired for giving a cold woman a sandwich that was scheduled to be thrown in the trash in less than an hour. Janie leaned forward. Urban culture says it was a breach of security protocol. I call it human protocol, I cut in. This isn't about me. It's about a system where it's easier to throw food away than to give it to someone who's starving. I don't support violence. I don't know anything about conflicts, but I do. 100% support people being allowed to eat, period. When I got back to the glass house, Ivy was waiting for me, her arms crossed. She had been listening on the radio. You did good, Maya, she said, her eyes shining. You spoke from the right place. She nodded, a sudden resolve on her face. Now, it's my turn. She made a call, not to a podcast, but to an old-school print reporter she'd known for 20 years, someone who used to cover the school board. While I was on the air, Ivy was telling her own story. She told her everything, the story Domenico had told me on the pier, but in more detail. She talked about the math lab, about the sound of her apartment door cracking, about looking a violent, drunken man in the eye and lying to his face, about hiding a terrified, silent 15-year-old boy named Nico under a table full of lab equipment. While we were fighting with words, Domenico was fighting with paper. Ansel, who seemed to be the conductor of this entire orchestra, left a file on the kitchen counter for me. It wasn't Mafia business. It was public record. Larkfield's legal team had just filed a massive complaint with the Metropolitan Commerce Bureau. It wasn't about me. It was about Neil. It was a 60-page document detailing every labor law urban culture hospitality had violated in the last 5 years. It was proof that Clearline Security was using non-bonded, uncertified guards, a massive breach of their city contract. Domenico wasn't just clearing the blacklist. He was salting the earth. He was dismantling Neil's entire corporate structure from the inside out. I heard Neil Parkhurst had been summoned for questioning. I also heard, from a quiet, offhand comment from Ansel, that Silas Vero wasn't happy about his new potential pawn being targeted by the city. Mister, Parkhurst found 2 Kestrel men parked outside his house this morning, Ansel said, sipping his coffee. Mr. Vero, it seems, is advising him to remain quiet. Neil was trapped, a legal machine on one side, a criminal syndicate on the other. I almost felt sorry for him, almost. The final piece of the plan clicked into place that afternoon. My old job, the $16 an hour one at the copper mill, was gone. I couldn't go back. It wasn't safe. I was still unemployable, just for a different, more dangerous reason. Then an email arrived. It wasn't from Dee. It was from a formal administrator, the Riverfront Restoration Fund, Domenico's foundation. It wasn't a handout. It wasn't a check. It was an invitation to interview for a newly created position program coordinator for the Shoreline Culinary Center, a job training program for at-risk adults. My heart hammered. He'd listened, on the pier. I told him I didn't want a handout. I wanted to earn it. This was a job, a real job, using my skills, my passion. It was a lifeline I could grab with my own 2 hands. The interview was 2 days later, in a high-rise downtown. It was real. A panel of 3 people, a stern woman from the city council, a celebrity chef, and a community organizer. They didn't coddle me. They grilled me. "You have food service experience, Miss Delgado, but this is a management role. Why should we choose you?" I took a deep breath because I know what it's like to be on the other side of the counter. I know that food service isn't just about food, it's about dignity. I found my rhythm. I wasn't the angel of the Astra anymore. I was Maya Delgado, applicant. This program can't just be about teaching someone to chop an onion. It has to be about teaching them their own value. It's about giving them a skill that no one can ever take away from them. It's not just about a hot meal. It's about a dignified life. I was finishing my closing statement when I saw him. He was standing in the back of the conference room, half hidden by the doorway, leaning against the wall. Domenico. He wasn't the boss. He wasn't the man from the pier. He was just a man. Watching. He wore a simple, dark gray sweater, his hands in his pockets. He wasn't looking at the panel. He was looking at me. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were on fire. There was a raw pride in them, an intensity that was so hot it almost buckled my knees. It was a look that said yes. I finished, my voice strong, even as my heart was doing that stupid, painful skip against my ribs. By the time the panel was thanking me, he was gone. I walked out into the hallway, feeling breathless, half disappointed and half relieved. My phone buzzed in my purse, a text from D. "You did good." Just 3 words. I stopped in the middle of the lobby. I read them once, twice. A 3rd time, a slow, hot blush climbed up my neck. My fingers hovered over the screen. "Thank you." I got the job. The victory, however, lasted about 6 hours. That night, Silas Vero played his hand. The smear campaign started, not on HarborCast, on the gutter blogs, the gossip sites, Mafia boss's new girlfriend. There was a grainy photo of me leaving the interview and another of Domenico leaving the same building 10 minutes later. Harbor City Angel is just Domenico Armand's mistress. Exclusive. Was the Let Her Eat campaign just a mob-funded power play? I felt sick. I was in the glasshouse kitchen, watching the link spread, my hands shaking. They were using me. They were turning my story, my interview, into something dirty. They were trying to poison the community kitchen proposal by poisoning me. "This is how he fights," I said, my voice thick. "He can't get to me, so he's trying to ruin me." "Mr. Armand has activated the Soft Rain media team," Ansel said from the doorway. He was always just there. "They are countering the narrative." "How?" I demanded, spinning to face him. "By denying it, that just makes me look guiltier. It makes it look like I'm his property. They are going to use my story." Ivy walked in, tying the belt on her robe. The real one, the one I told the reporter. "Ivy." "No," I said, rushing to her. "They'll use your name. They'll hound you. You'll be the mob boss's mom all over the news." "Let them," she said, her chin high. No, I wouldn't have it. I wouldn't let her be sacrificed. I turned to Ansel. "Tell them," I ordered, my voice sharp. "Tell the Soft Rain team they can use the story, all of it, but they don't use her name. They don't use her picture. They call her Miss Wit. Use her last name, protect her. That's the only way." Ansel looked at me, a flicker of something in his eyes. Respect. Maybe. He nodded once. A wise precaution. He made the call. The next day, the narrative didn't just shift. It was reborn. The HarborCast ran an exclusive follow-up. The smear campaign was mentioned and immediately dismissed. The real story, they said, was this the story of Miss Wit, a courageous 10th grade math teacher who, over 20 years ago, saved a troubled boy named Nico from a violent home. They framed Domenico's interest in Ivy not as a secret, but as a debt of honor. They framed his interest in me as an extension of that debt. He wasn't protecting a mistress. He was protecting the woman who had protected his mom. It was brilliant. It was devastating. The city loved it. The smear campaign evaporated. It was drowned in a wave of public sympathy. The community kitchen proposal wasn't just popular anymore. It was a moral imperative. Support for the fund shot up to 78%. I was watching the news with Ivy, my new employment contract sitting on the table. "He's winning," I whispered, stunned. "Yes," Ivy said, sipping her cocoa. "Silas Vero knows how to fight with fear. He just learned that Domenico, he knows how to fight with a story. And a story, child, is something you can't kill." The victory felt strange. I had the job. The smear campaign had failed. Ivy was safe. The community kitchen proposal was moving forward. By every metric, we had won. But I was still a prisoner. I'd spent the last 4 days in the Nocturne Glasshouse, a beautiful, sterile fortress where the city skyline was just a silent, glittering map of a world I couldn't touch. I had a new, amazing job waiting for me, but I couldn't even go to my own apartment to get my clothes. Ansel's Nightkind team had quietly packed and moved my entire life into a high-tech storage unit, pending security clearance. I was the angel of the Astra, a symbol of dignity, and I was completely powerless. That night, the storm that had been threatening all week finally broke. This wasn't the cold, spitting rain from the night I was fired. This was a war. The wind howled against the massive glass walls of the house, a sound like a low-flying jet. Rain hit the roof in horizontal sheets. It was almost beautiful, watching the city lights blur and vanish behind the deluge. I was in the main living area, curled on a sofa that probably cost more than my car. I was reading a training manual for the culinary center, but I hadn't turned the page in an hour. Ivy had gone to bed early, her small guest room a quiet sanctuary. Ansel was nowhere to be seen. I was alone, listening to the storm, feeling the adrenaline of the last week finally, painfully draining out of me. Suddenly, the soft, recessed lights in the ceiling flickered. They snapped off, plunging the massive room into near blackness, and then buzzed back on, but at a lower level, a dim, yellow, emergency light setting. The house was so quiet. I could suddenly hear the sound of the wind, not just as a roar, but as 1,000 tiny whistles where it found the steel seams of the house. And I could hear breathing. I looked up. Domenico was standing in the archway, his form a dark silhouette against the faintly lit herb garden in the hall. He wasn't the CEO from the interview, or the boss from the night of the attack. He was just the man from the pier. He was holding a thick, gray wool blanket, the kind that looks soft and heavy at the same time. He didn't move. He just watched me. "You're trembling," he said. His voice was quiet, just loud enough to carry over the storm. I looked down at my hands, clasped around my knees. He was right, a fine. Persistent tremor was running through me. It wasn't the cold. The house was perfectly warm. It was the crash. The letdown after days of being wired, terrified, and then victorious. "It's just the adrenaline," I whispered. "It's finally wearing off. I'm fine." He walked slowly into the room. The soft yellow light caught the angles of his face, casting deep shadows. He stopped at the edge of the sofa, not too close. "Ivy's asleep," he said, stating the obvious. He held the blanket. "I can sit here, or I can leave this and go." It was a question, a real one. He was giving me the choice. I remembered the hallway, the hand over my mouth, the feeling of having no choice at all. I just nodded. He sat, not next to me. On the other end of the long, L-shaped sofa, he placed the blanket on the cushion between us, a safe, neutral ground. The space between us felt enormous. It was filled with the sound of the rain hammering the glass, the faint smell of rosemary from the hall, and 1,000 things we hadn't said. We sat in silence for a long time, maybe 5 minutes. I watched the lightning flash over the city. a silent white flare that lit up the room, followed seconds later by a low, rattling thunder. He was just watching the storm. His long legs stretched out, his hands resting on his knees. I found myself staring at his hands. They weren't the smooth, manicured hands of a CEO. They were strong, the knuckles slightly prominent, the fingers long. I saw a faint silvery line on the back of his right hand, near the wrist, a scar. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was the dim light. Maybe it was the shared silence. The feeling of being the only two people awake in a world that was tearing itself apart. I reached out, my fingers tracing the air just above the scar. "This one," I whispered. "Where did it come from?" He looked down at my hand, then at his own. He didn't pull away. "The night Ivy called for help," he said, his voice a low gravel. "My stepfather, he wasn't happy that she'd interfered. When he came to her door, I tried to get in between them. He had a bottle." He paused. It was a long time ago. He said it so simply, a single, short explanation for a lifetime of pain. The boy under the table, the woman who stood in front of the door. My hand, which had been hovering, settled on his. My fingers brushed the scar. It was just a touch, skin on skin, but it felt like a jolt, a connection. He didn't move. He just let me. I looked from his hand to his face. He was watching me, his eyes dark in the yellow light, the ice completely gone. He wasn't the boss. He wasn't the savior. He was just Nico. Slowly, moved by an instinct I didn't understand, I moved my other hand, not to his face, to his chest. I just laid my palm flat against his sweater, right over his heart. Under my hand, I felt it thump, 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 thump. It wasn't slow. It wasn't calm. It was hammering, a rapid, powerful beat that matched the rain on the glass. He was just as unsteady as I was. His eyes never left mine. They were asking a question, and I knew, somehow, my own eyes were answering it. He leaned in. It was slow, agonizingly slow. He gave me every second to pull away, to turn my head, to say no. I didn't move. I just watched him come closer, my hand still flat against his chest, feeling his heart accelerate. His lips met mine. It wasn't a kiss of violence or possession. It wasn't demanding. It was certain. It was a slow, firm pressure, a simple, devastating acknowledgement. It was a promise, "I see you. I'm here." It was just a landing. The tremor in my hands stopped. The roar of the storm faded. There was nothing but the warmth of his mouth and the hammering of his heart under my palm. The kiss lingered, a long, breathless moment, and then something in me, something that had been coiled tight with fear for weeks, finally let go. I wasn't the angel of the Astra. I wasn't a pawn. I was just me. My fingers, which had been resting on his sweater, curled. I gripped the fabric, and I pulled him closer. That's when it changed. The simple pressure became something else, something deeper. A spark that had been buried in the cold finally caught fire. His hand, which had been resting on the sofa, came up, not to my face. He didn't grab me. His fingers slid gently into the hair at the nape of my neck, his thumb finding the sensitive skin just behind my ear. It was a touch so tender, so respectful. It made my head spin. He wasn't taking, he was holding, grounding me. Crack boom! A flash of lightning so bright it bleached the room white was followed instantly by a clap of thunder so loud it shook the glass in the walls. We both flinched, breaking apart, breathless. I let out a shaky laugh. It sounded too loud in the sudden silence. Domenico, he actually smiled. Not the sharp, cold smile from the pier, a real, small, unguarded smile. "Sorry," he murmured, his voice thick. "I didn't order that." The moment was broken. The intensity was gone, replaced by something warmer, something real. "I'm scared," I whispered, the confession bubbling up before I could stop it. His smile vanished, his hand on my neck tensed. "Maya—" "No," I said, shaking my head, meeting his eyes. Not of you. I'm just scared of all this. Of Silas. of what this means, of everything. I took a shaky breath. But I'm not scared of you. He searched my face, his eyes dark and serious. He let go of my neck, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned in again, but not for a kiss. He just rested his forehead against mine. I closed my eyes. I could feel his breath on my skin. We were just there, hiding in plain sight, forehead to forehead. "I will only go as far as you want, Maya," he whispered, his voice a raw promise against my skin. "Always. That's the boundary." My lifeline wasn't trying to be my lifeline. It was just offering a hand. I slid closer, and he wrapped his arms around me. He pulled the heavy wool blanket from the cushion and draped it over us both, cocooning us. We just sat. We didn't talk. We didn't kiss again. He just held me. I was tucked against his side, my head resting on his chest, my hand still over his heart, which was finally, slowly, calming down. He rested his chin on the top of my head. We listened to the rain. We listened to each other breathe. I was surrounded by his warmth, the faint, clean scent of his skin, and the leftover, distant smell of Mom's cocoa from the kitchen. The storm outside raged, but in here, under the blanket, it was quiet. It was safe. I felt the exhaustion of the week, the adrenaline, the fear, finally receding. My eyelids felt heavy. I was drifting, caught between the sound of the storm and the steady, solid beat of his heart. I thought about the man who had fought a media war for me, the man who had faced down the city council, the man who had been brave enough to use a story instead of a fist. "Domenico," I murmured, my voice thick with sleep. "I'm here. Tomorrow," I whispered, not even sure if I was making sense. When you fight, be as brave as you were today." I felt his chest rumble with a low sound, almost a laugh. His arms tightened around me. "I will," he murmured into my hair. I felt him smile in the dark, and for the first time since I'd pushed open that fire escape door, I fell asleep feeling completely safe. The peace lasted for 2 days. 2 days of waking up in the glass house, the scent of basil and his coat, which still hung in the closet. 2 days of quiet breakfasts with Ivy, of working on the culinary center curriculum, of feeling almost normal. Then Silas Vero ripped that piece apart. It didn't happen at the fortress. It happened at the one place Ivy refused to give up. Key Station 7. It was one of Domenico's few, truly legitimate charities, a community kitchen run by his Riverfront Fund. After 2 days of being protected, Ivy had put her foot down. "I am not a prisoner, Nico," she'd insisted, "and I am not idle. I'm going to serve breakfast." Domenico hated it, but he knew, just as I did, that her principles were what kept her whole. He'd agreed. On one condition, Ansel and 2 of the Nightkind team would be there, disguised as volunteers. I was in the glasshouse kitchen, trying to figure out the complex espresso machine, when Domenico's phone, the one on the counter, buzzed. It wasn't a call. It was a panic alert. He didn't say a word. The man I'd shared a blanket with 2 nights ago vanished. The boss was back. He was moving, grabbing a jacket, his face a mask of cold, controlled fury. "Ansel just triggered his beacon," he said, his voice flat. "Stay here." "Like hell I will," I said, grabbing my own shoes. By the time we got to the car, Ansel was already on the line. His voice was tight, breathless. "It wasn't a frontal assault, it was precise, a distraction. A food delivery van cut off the alley. 2 men, they looked like junkies, created a diversion at the front door. While we were focused on them, a black van. They came in the back. They knew her schedule. They knew exactly where she'd be." "Ansel," Domenico bit out, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Where is she?" "They took her, sir. It looked like a random mugging, but they didn't take the cash box. They took her." "They're trying to pull you out," I whispered, my stomach turning to ice. "They're trying to get you out of the shadows. Domenico." He didn't answer. He was just driving, his jaw set so hard I thought it might crack. We got back to the glass house, which had transformed from a home into a command center. Ansel was there, his suit jacket off, his face pale. The Kite Watch team, Domenico's analysts, were on a massive screen, their faces remote. "They're letting us sweat," Ansel said. "No contact, no demands. They're enjoying this." "How did they know her schedule?" I asked, pacing. "She just decided to go this morning." "Someone is feeding them information," Ansel said. "Someone with access to the Riverfront Fund's volunteer roster." Ivy's purse was on the counter, left behind in her hurry. Her burner phone, the one Domenico had given her, was inside. I picked it up, just needing to hold something of hers. I turned it on. The lock screen lit up. There was one new text message, received 2 days ago, an unknown number. It was just an emoji, a single hawk. My blood ran cold. "Ansel." He looked. His face went rigid. Kestrel, Silas's symbol. He typed something into his tablet. "This number. It's a burner, but the signal it triangulated 2 days ago near the Astra Tower." Astra. Ansel's face was grim. He pulled up a security file. Parking garage footage, time-stamped yesterday. It was Neil Parkhurst. He was standing next to a black car, handing a slim USB drive to a man I didn't recognize. He was smiling. "He sold her out," I whispered. That worm? He sold her out to Silas." As if summoned, Domenico's personal phone rang. The screen read unknown. Domenico picked it up, putting it on speaker. "It's been a while, Nico," a voice said. It was oily, amused. "Silas Vero." "What do you want, Silas?" Domenico's voice was pure ice. "Just to talk, but I find conversations go better with a little insurance. I have your mom. She's fine, for now, but she's old. Nico, the cold gets to her." "What do you want?" $5 million, Silas said, the amusement gone. "Cash, non-sequential, and you bring it. You come alone. You come clean. My people will tell you where." The line went dead. Domenico stood silent for a second. Then he turned to Ansel. "Get the teams. Nightkind's tactical unit. I want every man we have. We're going to find the warehouse he's in, and we are going to level it. I don't care what it costs. We burn his entire operation to the ground, tonight." "No." They both looked at me. I was shaking, but I stepped in front of Domenico, right in his path. "Maya, get out of the way," he said. It was a command. "No," I said again, my voice stronger. "You told me to be brave, so you be brave. This is what he wants. He's baiting you. He wants you to come in with guns. He wants you to start a street war. He wants you to be the monster so he can play the victim. You beat him with the media. You beat him with story. Don't let him win by making you as stupid and brutal as he is." I put my hands on his chest, right where I had the other night. His heart was hammering, just like it had been then. But this was rage, not romance. "Don't let them control your anger," I pleaded. "You want to hit him, fine, but let's let him hit our spot. Let's build the trap." He stared at me, his eyes a storm of ice and fury. I could see the battle inside him, the strategist versus the sun. He looked past me, at Ansel. Ansel, who had been watching us, gave a single, slow nod. "She's right, sir. We do this clean. We do this smart. We use his own plan against him." Domenico closed his eyes. He took one long, shuddering breath. When he opened them, the rage was still there, but it was cold. It was focused. It was a weapon. "Okay," he said. "What's the play?" Ansel took over. "The plan is hollow railing. We give them exactly what they want." The Kite Watch team was already at work. The heat map of the city lit up on the main screen. "Mr. Vero's known assets are centered around the old port," one of the analysts said. "We've flagged 3 unregistered panel vans that have been circling Dock 12 for the last hour. We believe Warehouse E is the target." "The money," Domenico said. "Already being prepped," Ansel said. "The duffel bag is lined with micro-woven beacon tags, undetectable, military grade. We'll know where that bag is, down to the inch, anywhere in the city." "He wants me to make the drop," Domenico said, his jaw tightening. "And that's the one thing he's not going to get," I said. Domenico turned to me. Absolutely not. Maya, you're not going. That's final. He'll be watching for you, I argued, my voice surprisingly calm. I wasn't scared. I was focused. He'll be looking for a man. He'll be looking for a threat. He won't be looking for me. He thinks I'm your weakness. He thinks I'm the mistress. Let him think it. Let me be the one to hand it over. I'm the last person he'll suspect of being part of a plan. I'll be wired. You'll hear every single word. He hated it. I could see the violent refusal in his eyes. It's the right move, Domenico, I said softly. It's the smart move. Trust me. He stared at me for a long 10 seconds. He nodded, once. An hour later, I was standing on the Ashdown Bridge, a heavy duffel bag at my feet. The wind was cold. A burner phone in my pocket rang. You're not Nico, the distorted voice snarled. He's not stupid, I said, my voice steady. Ansel's earpiece was a tiny, clear voice in my ear. Good, Maya, keep him off balance. You want the money or not, I just need her to be safe. Fine. You're moving. Red Line Station, Monroe Platform. You have 10 minutes. The line went dead. They're running us. Domenico's voice crackled in my ear, tight with anxiety. It's okay. Ansel's voice soothed. They're testing for a tail. Do it, Maya. I got to the red line. The phone rang. 3rd floor parking garage, 12th and Harbor. I got to the garage. The phone rang again. Back alley behind the old tannery. Dock 12. They're herding her to the warehouse, Ansel said. Kite Watch confirms. All Kestrel vehicles are now stationary at Warehouse E. They're taking the bait. I walked into the dark alley. A car with no lights on idled at the far end. A window lowered. Leave the bag. Walk away. Don't look back. I dropped the bag. I turned and walked, my heart hammering. I heard a car door open, the bag being thrown in. The car sped off. I got to the corner. Ansel's SUV slid up, the door already open. I jumped in. Domenico was in the SUV behind us. We moved, silent and dark. We parked 2 streets away from Warehouse E. The bag is inside, Ansel said, watching a screen. It's stationary. Silas's car just flashed its headlights. They're all there. Now, Domenico's voice came over the comms. Activate the blackout field. Ansel flipped a switch on a console. I didn't hear anything, but the streetlights for 3 blocks flickered. Field is active, Ansel said. All local cell. GPS and radio signals are down. They're deaf. The huge rolling door of Warehouse E slid open, silently. I saw her, Ivy. She was tied to a chair in the middle of the floor, a single, harsh light on her. She was okay. She was glaring at the man standing next to her. Silas Vero. And next to him, wringing his hands, was Neil Parkhurst. Domenico stepped out of his car, flanked by 2 night-kind men. Ansel and I got out of ours. We just walked in. Silas spun around, his face, which had been triumphant, twisted in confusion. He snarled at his men. What the hell I told you to? He pulled out his phone. Dead. Neil saw me. His face crumpled. It was a mask of pure, abject terror. He looked at me, at Domenico, at the silent, imposing figures of the Nightkind team. He bolted. He just turned and ran for a side door. Domenico, I said, go, he said, his eyes never leaving Silas. I ran. Neil was clumsy, panicking. He slipped on a patch of oil, sprawling on the concrete, gasping. I didn't run, I just walked, stopping a few feet away, standing over him. He looked up at me, sobbing. Maya, please, I didn't. They made me. I looked down at him. No anger, just pity and disgust. I tapped the small black pin on my jacket, the pin Ansel had given me. The tiny red record light was on. How much? Neil, I asked, my voice echoing in the vast space. How much did you sell that rainy night for? How much was Ivy's life worth? He just wept, his face in the grime. I left him there and walked back to the center. Silas was surrounded. His men were tense, but Ansel's team was disciplined, their hands visibly empty. No one was drawing a weapon. It's over, Silas, Domenico said. Silas laughed, a high, thin sound. Over. You walk in here. No army. Just you. You really are weak. Your heart all this. For an old woman and a barista, it made you weak. Nico. Domenico didn't move. He looked calm. He looked brave. You're wrong, Silas, Domenico said, his voice quiet. A heart is the one thing you're terrified to own. Touching, Silas sneered. My men will still... You should check your phones again. Domenico interrupted. The field is down. As one. Silas and his men fumbled for their phones. They lit up. A dozen alerts. Silas's face went from white to gray. What is this? That, Domenico said, is a live news feed from Harborcast. And as he said it, the massive metal doors at the other end of the warehouse rolled up. It wasn't an army. It was lights. Bright, hot, television camera lights. A group of people in dark suits, flanked by flashing cameras and reporters, walked in. Silas Vero, one of the men in suits, said, his voice booming, I'm Director Thompson with the Metropolitan Crime Ethics Office. You are under arrest for the conspiracy to kidnap, extortion, and the illegal coercion of a city witness. Silas stared, dumbfounded. A witness? Mister, Parkhurst's testimony has been most illuminating, the director said, gesturing to Neil, who was now being helped up by two officers. It hit me. Domenico hadn't just set a trap for the kidnapping. He'd used the entire event. He'd used Neil's corruption as the legal leverage. The cameras panned. They saw Silas, his hands half raised. They saw Ivy tied to the chair. They saw me walking over and untying her. They saw Neil in handcuffs. Domenico had done it. He hadn't fired a shot. He hadn't thrown a punch. He'd used Silas's own greed, Neil's cowardice, and the power of the press. He'd exposed the entire Kestrel operation live on the 10 o'clock news. He'd been brave, just like I asked. The aftermath was a blur of flashing lights, not from a storm, but from cameras. The warehouse, which moments before had been a silent trap, was now a floodlit stage. Silas Vero, his face a mask of disbelief, was led away in handcuffs. Neil, blubbering and incoherent, was guided into a separate car. I didn't watch them. I was with Ivy. I'd cut the ropes from her wrists, and the second she was free, she didn't cry or panic. She just took my face in her hands, her palms rough, and said, You are a remarkable child. A volunteer EMT, part of the cover Domenico had arranged, was checking her. She's fine. The young woman said, Blood pressure is high, but who wouldn't be? No signs of harm. Ansel steered us out a side door, away from the media circus, and into one of the waiting SUVs. Domenico got in a minute later, his face grim but the ice gone from his eyes. He just looked at Ivy in the seat across from him. It's over, Mom. She just nodded, then looked at me. We got back to the glass house. The sun was starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and watery orange. A private doctor, a kind older man who looked like he'd seen everything, came to check on Ivy properly. He gave her a mild sedative to help her rest. I sat with her by the bed in her quiet room. She took my hand. He's a good man, Maya, she said, her voice heavy with the sedative. But he's complicated. His world is complicated. I know, I whispered. You don't owe him, she said, her eyes suddenly sharp, cutting through the haze. Not for this. Not for any of it. He did this for him, for his past. You were just the catalyst. You don't owe anyone anything but yourself. Remember that. She was giving me an out. She was making sure I knew that, despite the rescue, despite the job, I was still free, that I wasn't his. I will, I said. Rest, Ivy. I left her to sleep and walked into the main room. Domenico was standing by the glass wall, watching the sun come up, his phone in his hand. The news is comprehensive, he said. It was an understatement. For the next 3 days, we watched the entire story unspool. It was a masterclass in controlled demolition. Neil Parkhurst, faced with kidnapping conspiracy charges, had folded instantly. He'd signed a full confession with the Office of Civic Contracting, detailing not just the tip-off to Silas, but a years-long scheme of bribery, kickbacks and safety violations that Silas had used to control him, urban culture hospitality, in a panic of bad press, fired him publicly, issued a groveling apology, and paid a fine so large it was in the 8 figures. The reputation clause was history. But the real show was Silas. The Federal Urban Security Division had taken over the case. This wasn't a local bust anymore. My face, my name, was suddenly attached to a massive federal investigation. They didn't charge Silas with kidnapping. That was just the leverage. They charged him with a string of crimes that sounded boring but were deadly: conspiracy to defraud public assets, racketeering, and mail fraud related to city contracts. The Kestrel outfit, his entire empire of security contracts, was dissolved. His muscle was just gone. And Domenico, he was a hero. The media painted him as the concerned citizen and philanthropist who, upon learning of a threat against his beloved former teacher, the Miss Witt story was everywhere, had used his own legal and security resources to set a brilliant ethical trap for a corrupt competitor. He hadn't just saved Ivy, he'd saved the city from a corrupt contractor. He'd used the law. He'd used the media. He hadn't thrown a single punch. His hands, in the eyes of the world, were spotless. I was sitting on the sofa, watching him on TV, when my own phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Miss Delgado. The voice was old, formal. This is Arthur Vance, from the Board of Directors at the Harbor City Museum of Contemporary Art. I sat up straight. Yes. On behalf of the entire board, I want to offer our deepest, most profound apologies. What Neil Parkhurst did was unconscionable. We had no idea. He cleared his throat. We've already sent your back pay, with a significant bonus, I assure you. And we would be honored if you would consider returning to your position as shift supervisor, with a 20% raise, of course, and full benefits. I looked at the TV, where Domenico was walking down the steps of City Hall. I thought about the cold, sterile smell of the Astra. I thought about the acrylic sign. I smiled. It was the first truly light-hearted smile in weeks. Thank you. Mr. Vance, that's very generous, but I'm afraid I have to decline. I've already accepted another position. Oh, he said, sounding disappointed. May I ask where? I'm the new program director for the Harbor Warm Kitchen Fund, I said. There was a long pause. Ah, he said. I see. Well, good luck. Miss Delgado. We hung up. I wasn't that girl anymore. I wasn't the victim. For the next 2 weeks, I worked. I moved out of the glass house and into a new apartment, one I'd found myself, and paid the deposit for with my own back pay. I spent 10 hours a day in a rented office downtown, hammering out the infrastructure for the kitchen. I wrote the charter. It was my declaration of war, but a different kind. Rule 1 service will be provided to any and all, without the requirement of ID, paperwork, or proof of residence. Rule 2. We will serve with dignity. All meals will be hot, fresh, and nutritious. Rule 3. This is a sanctuary, not a spectacle. No filming, no photography, and no content creation for social media will be permitted. We are not here for likes. We are here to feed people. Ivy, who was now living in a small, sunny apartment paid for by the Teachers' Benevolence Fund, a fund I was pretty sure Domenico had created that week, came by the office. This is good, Maya, she said, reading the charter. This is right. I have a job for you if you want it, I said, pushing another paper toward her. I've set aside a small budget for an honorary advisor and educational outreach position. She raised an eyebrow. It's a math class, I said, grinning, twice a week, for anyone who wants to come, job skills, budgeting, or just learning, restoring dignity through knowledge. You called it. Her eyes shone. I'd like that very much. I was working late that Friday, the office quiet, the city lights just coming on. I was wrestling with a stack of vendor contracts when I heard the door open. Domenico. He was in his suit, but his tie was loosened. He looked tired, but the ice was gone. He just looked like Nico. He was holding 2 paper cups of coffee. Not burnt sludge. This smelled like the good stuff. From the copper mill, he said, placing one on my desk. The manager, Carol, says she's still sorry she couldn't hire you. I told her you were busy. Thank you, I said, my hands wrapping around the warm cup. We sat in the quiet office. You're really doing it, he said, looking at the whiteboards, at the stacks of paper, building it from the ground up. We're doing it, I corrected. He reached into his briefcase. He pulled out a slim, leather-bound document. It didn't look like a business proposal. What's this? I asked. It's internal, he said. Larkfield business. Our operating protocols, our rules. I opened it. It was full of clauses and sections, like a legal document. Section 1, assets and holdings. Section 2, personnel and conduct. He had a red pen in his hand. He'd marked 2 new amendments, scrawled in the margin. Section 2, Amendment 4, all welfare and community aid sites, key stations, harbor kitchen, etc., are hereby designated as Level 1 protected zones. Any threat, intimidation, or interference with their operation by any Larkfield personnel will be considered a capital breach. Section 2, Amendment 4, B Asset Mom Ivy Whitaker is elevated to Level 0 classification. Permanent, non-invasive protective detail. All assets are to be considered secondary to her safety. No exceptions. I read them, and my heart felt full. And he was changing his world, and he was putting Ivy and the kitchen and all the people like her at the absolute center of his protection. It's good, I said, my voice a little thick. He nodded, about to take it back. Wait, I said, I picked up my own pen. He raised an eyebrow, a challenge in his eyes. I turned to Section 1, Assets and Holdings. I found the part about the Riverfront Fund. I wrote, my handwriting clear and firm. Section 1, Amendment to Sea Fund Transparency. All public-facing charitable funds, including the Riverfront Restoration Fund and the Harbor Warm Kitchen Fund, will be subject to a quarterly, independent, and publicly auditable ledger to ensure absolute transparency of all donations and expenditures. I finished writing and slid it back to him. He read it. He didn't move for a long 10 seconds. I watched a dozen emotions cross his face. He was the boss. I had just walked into his internal secret rule book and added a rule. I had just mandated transparency. I was challenging the very shadow he lived in. He looked up from the page, his eyes meeting mine. He wasn't angry. He wasn't the boss. He looked proud. And then he smiled. That slow, unguarded smile that had shaken me on the pier. Okay, he said, and he capped his pen. Later that week, we were walking. It wasn't a secret. It wasn't at 1 a.m. It was 7 p.m., the sun a fiery smear over the river. We were walking along the new riverfront, the one his fund had helped build. The city passed by us, people jogging, walking their dogs. No one looked twice. We were just a man and a woman, walking by the water. He reached over and took my hand, his fingers laced with mine. It wasn't a chain. It wasn't a lifeline. It was just a hand, warm and strong and real. We stopped at the railing, looking out at the water, just as we had that first night on the pier. You changed me, you know, he said, his voice quiet. For me only. I didn't do anything. I said, no, he said, turning to me. You did. I've spent my whole life learning how to win with fear, with leverage, with a fist. I learned how to win without a fist because of you. I looked up at him, at this complicated, dangerous, good man. And I said, squeezing his hand, I spent my whole life being told to never trust anyone, to only be my own lifeline. I leaned my head on his shoulder. I learned how to trust someone imperfect because of you. It wasn't a marble palace. It wasn't a dining node. The Jericho Warm Kitchen was just a big room in a rented warehouse on the bad side of the pier, filled with mismatched tables, secondhand chairs, and the brightest, warmest lights we could find. And it was packed. The line was out the door and around the corner, not just the ghosts in gray beanies. It was everyone Harbor City tried to ignore. It was the night shift security guards, their faces gray with fatigue. It was the community college students in threadbare coats, whispering about their finals, their backpacks clutched to their chests. It was the families who had just lost their apartments, the kids too quiet, their eyes too big. Every single face had a place to sit. The air was thick and glorious. It wasn't the smell of burnt coffee and citrus wax. It was the smell of fresh, baking bread Ivy's recipe and a massive pot of chicken and vegetable stew that I'd spent all day simmering. It smelled like home. I was standing on a small wooden crate, my hands shaking, a single microphone in front of me. Domenico was in the back, leaning against a steel support beam, his arms crossed. He wasn't the boss. He was just watching. Ansel was somewhere, blending in. I tapped the mic. The feedback squeal made everyone laugh. "Hi," I said, my voice shaky. "Wow, hi. My name is Maya Delgado, and welcome to the Harbor Warm Kitchen." A wave of applause, warm and real, washed over me. "A few weeks ago," I said, my voice finding its strength, "I was fired from my job for giving one cold, hungry person a sandwich that was going to be thrown in the trash." The room went quiet. They knew the story. I was their story. I was fired for breaching operational standards. I was told I had damaged the brand. I was made to feel ashamed for being kind. I looked out at the faces, the tired eyes, the hopeful eyes. Well, this city, this world, it uses shame as a weapon. It shames you for being poor. It shames you for being hungry. It shames you for needing help. Tonight, we fire shame. The applause this time was a roar. "Tonight," I finished, my voice thick. "Nobody here is a breach of protocol. Nobody here is damaging the brand. Tonight, you are our guests, you are our neighbors, and you will all eat well." I stepped down, my heart hammering, and handed a pair of oversized, comically large scissors to Ivy. She was standing next to a big red ribbon we'd tied across the main counter. She was wearing a new blue coat, but her eyes were the same, strong, clear. She didn't make a speech. She just looked at the crowd, smiled, and cut the ribbon. The sound of the snip was lost in a wave of cheers and applause that felt like a physical force, a wave of pure, unfiltered joy. The line started moving. The first bowl of stew was ladled out, the sound of a city relearning its own kindness. I was in the middle of hugging Ivy when a hand touched my arm. A reporter from HarborCast, the same one who had covered the story from the beginning. "Maya," she said, holding her mic out, her cameraman's light bright in my eyes. "It's an incredible night, but looking back, all of it, the firing, the attack, the political fight, do you have any regrets?" I looked at her. I thought of Neil. I thought of the Kestrel thugs in the hallway. I thought of the cold pier. I smiled. "If kindness is a crime," I said, my voice clear and carrying, "then I'll be a repeat offender for the rest of my life." The night went on, a blur of steam, bread, and laughter. I was working the line, ladling stew, when a sudden quiet fell over the front door. A group of kids, really, young men. They were in their late teens, early 20s, wearing dark hoodies, their posture a mix of false bravado and genuine fear. They weren't here for food. They were here for something else. Ansel tensed, his hand moving inside his jacket. I knew their faces from the news, from the grainy photos of Silas Vero's associates. They were ex-Kestrel, the bottom feeders, left behind when the head of the snake was cut off. They were rudderless and dangerous. The oldest one, a kid with hollow cheeks and angry eyes, looked right at Domenico, who was still by the back wall. It was a challenge, a test. Domenico didn't look at Ansel. He didn't call for his men. He just walked. He walked right up to the group, his hands in his pockets, his posture relaxed. He didn't loom. He didn't threaten. He just stopped in front of them. "You're Silas's kids," he said, his voice quiet. "We ain't nobody's kids." The leader spat, but his voice wavered. "I know," Domenico said. "He left you with nothing. Right, no paycheck, no future." The kid just glared. Domenico didn't offer them money. He didn't offer them a place in his organization. He pulled a small stack of flyers from his jacket pocket. Shoreline Culinary Center. Job training and placement. Classes start Monday. My program. This is a job, Domenico said, holding out the flyers. It's not easy. You'll be chopping onions at 7 in the morning. But it's a way up. It's real. The kids stared at the flyers. They stared at him. They were expecting a fist, a threat. They were being offered a resume. The lead kid looked at his friends, then back at Domenico. His hand was shaking, but he reached out. He took a flyer. He didn't say thank you. He just nodded. Once. And the group, they just turned and left. The cycle of violence, of retaliation, it hadn't been broken by a bigger fist. It had been paused by a piece of paper. I was still processing that when I saw another ghost. He was standing near the donation table, which was overflowing with canned goods and $10 bills. Neil Parkhurst. He wasn't the preening, furious manager from the Astra. He was a broken man. He'd lost his job, his reputation, and he'd narrowly avoided a federal prison sentence by testifying. He was wearing an old windbreaker, his face pale. He looked small. He saw me watching. He flinched, as if I might yell at him. He quickly, furtively placed a white envelope on the table. It was thin. It probably held his last $20. It was, I knew, an apology. He was turning to scurry out when he almost bumped into Ivy. She had been watching him. Neil froze, his face a mask of shame and terror. He looked like he was about to run. Ivy just looked at him. No anger, no pity, just acknowledgement. She didn't say a word. She just gave him a single, slow, gentle nod. It was a period at the end of a sentence. It was absolution. Everyone has the right to make amends. Neil's face crumpled. He turned and walked out, his shoulders hunched, but maybe just a little straighter than before. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. A warm hand found mine. Domenico. You're done for the night, boss, he murmured, his thumb brushing my knuckles. The night's not over, I said, gesturing to the line, which was finally getting shorter. It is for you. He gently pulled me. Come on, you need air. He led me out a side door, onto a small loading dock. The rain had started again, but it was just a fine, soft mist, like powdered sugar. It felt good on my hot face. The loud, happy noise of the kitchen was muffled, a warm hum behind us. You did this, Maya, he said, looking at me, his eyes reflecting the wet city lights, all of it. We did this, I corrected. He smiled. Mom's waiting. She's fine. She's waiting for a family picture, he said. I laughed. Family you, me, and Ivy. We're a strange family. Domenico. He stepped closer, his hands resting on my waist. The mist was collecting in his dark hair. They're the only kind that matter, he whispered. The ones who choose each other. He leaned in, and I met him halfway. He rested his forehead against mine, just as he had in the glass house. And then he kissed me. It wasn't the desperate, grounding kiss from the storm. It was warm. It was certain. It was an affirmation. I laced my fingers behind his neck, and he held me, his hands strong on my back. We were just two people, standing in the rain, on the loading dock of a soup kitchen. Click. We broke apart. A young woman with a press badge was standing 20 feet away, her camera lowered. She was from one of the community blogs. Sorry, she said, her face bright. I didn't mean to interrupt, but it was perfect. We just looked at her. She smiled. The No One Eats Invisible campaign. That's what they're calling this. I think I just got the poster. She waved and disappeared back into the night. So much for not being a spectacle, I murmured, resting my head on his chest. I felt his low laugh. I think we can let that one slide. A cheer erupted from inside the kitchen, loud, deafening. What now, I said. The vote, he said, his voice suddenly intense. He grabbed my hand. Come on. We ran back inside. The whole kitchen was crowded around a big TV we'd set up on the counter. It was tuned to HarborCast, live from City Hall. The clock on the screen read 11:56 p.m. And in a last-minute emergency session, the anchorwoman was saying, The city council is voting on the community proposed Dignity Kitchen Act. It was our law, the one I'd helped draft, the one that stripped away all the zoning and licensing barriers that Silas Vero had used for decades to control which charities could and couldn't operate. It was the key to everything. The vote is coming in now. The anchor said. The room was silent. You could hear a pin drop. I held my breath. My hand was gripping Domenico so hard my knuckles were white. A graphic flashed on the screen. Dignity Kitchen Act passed. Vote 12, 1. The room was silent for one more second. The clock on the wall, right below the TV, ticked midnight. The cheer that exploded didn't just fill the room. It shook the building. It was a roar of pure, unadulterated victory. Strangers were hugging. The volunteers were crying. Ivy was the first one to reach me. She pulled me into a hug so tight it lifted me off the ground. "You did it, child," she wept into my ear. "You did it." She let me go, and I turned. Domenico was standing right there. He wasn't cheering, he wasn't smiling, he was just watching me. His eyes, those ice-gray eyes, were full of a light I'd never seen before. A future. I didn't run, I just walked, right through the cheering crowd and put my arms around his neck. He held me, his face buried in my hair, and I just held on. It wasn't a perfect future. I knew that. His world was still full of shadows. My world was still full of broken people. It wasn't clean, but it was right. It was a future pointed in the right direction. It was love, with discipline. It was power, with boundaries. It was a city, cold and broken, learning how to be kind again, one meal at a time. Thank you so much for listening to our story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below, and let's share our thoughts. Please don't forget to subscribe to Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.